Our biggest thanks tonight go out to our sponsor, BBVA Compass. They are the most important folks in the room. We are very, very happy that they were willing to come out and sponsor this event. We're proud to have them here tonight. We're actually going to bring up to the stage Robert McDaniel, the area president of BBVA, to say just a few words. Robert?
Thank you, Dean. I was talking to Brian right before the discussion tonight, and he said, why don't you start out about 30 minutes of modern monetary policy discussion to really kick off the evening? Is that okay if we don't talk about that? Is that okay? Well, I'm Robert McDaniel. I'm the city president for BBVA Compass, and we are very proud to be a sponsor for this year's Real Estate Forum. You know, every time it's just been a great experience for us all. We all come with a lot of knowledge. It's just a great event for us. We've got a number of bankers here tonight, and I'd love you to raise your hand in the room. And just around, there are a lot of people already standing, so there's a few people over here, and there's Darlene over here. So, got a big group right here in the middle. And I wanted to tell you, we just have a great team, a really experienced, knowledgeable people, and they really put the client at the center of everything they do. And that's what we're really proud of. And it's really in our DNA. That's what our focus is. But we're a full-service bank. We also have commercial banking, retail banking, mortgage banking, investment services. So we have everything option available to help you and meet your goals for 2018. So if you're looking to expand your business, or you're doing a new project or development, or if you just want to do some financial planning, we certainly have the people to make that happen for you. You know, I think a couple things that really stand out to me that we're proud of is, one, we have the #1 mobile banking app in the country. And many researchers and professionals in the industry say that, but it's also, if you look at the App Store, shows our great rating. And it really goes to the focus we put on making our customers' lives easier and providing be more convenient. And so that takes a lot of effort to make that happen, and we're proud of that. We're also one of the top SBA lenders in the country. So if you've got folks that are looking, maybe acquiring a company or expanding, that's a great tool we have to make that happen. So obviously our retail team is strong. Consistently in our bank, one of the top rated for their customer service. And so I'm really proud of that, and our team led by Chuck Sprague does a fantastic job of that. Our commercial banking group, we have a strong local presence, but we augment that with tremendous resources that we can meet any of your project needs. And that's what we're really proud of. That's a unique model to BBVA Compass. So we really work hard to make things happen. So I think we do a lot in lending, in deposits, and investments. But sometimes people don't realize or forget banking's changed a lot, particularly at our bank. And we've got resources that can really help automate a lot of your processes. One thing I think of, we have a way to help automate your payables. And on top of that, you can earn a rebate. Make your life a lot easier and earn some money at the same time. And then on the other side, we also have the ability to set up a portal on your website so you can post your invoices for your clients, and they can make payments to you and really streamline your whole process. So a lot of capabilities. So if you hadn't had a chance to meet with one of our BBVA Compass bankers, I just encourage you and appreciate if you just reach out and visit. It'll be worth your while. I'll make a promise to that. So again, I echo Dean's comments earlier. We just really appreciate the whole organization, Bo and your team, for putting this together, and Tracy for putting this, all the efforts you put forward to really bring this to Gainesville. So it means a lot to us. So thank you all. Appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the evening.
And again, a huge thank you to Robert. This isn't possible without our sponsors. We're very proud to have you here tonight. Next part is another really important aspect of the evening, which is trying to get a handle on where we are on both the residential side and the commercial side. And we have two experts in the field to kind of tell us what's going on. The first one I'm going to introduce is Susan McQuillan, who probably needs no introduction whatsoever. She's the current president of GACAR. She's going to come up and talk about residential sales stats for 2017. Please give her a hand.
Well, I think I'll stand down here. First of all, hello. Thank you for inviting me to come here. It's a little intimidating to be in this room. Walked around and saw some people. And I know when they say you're nervous, you're supposed to be seeing people out there in their underwear. And Dave Farrow, nice pattern. So I'm going to talk to you just for a few minutes about residential real estate. And I don't know that there's too many people in here I need to tell about, but one of the things that we are having a problem, if we can call it that, in real estate is our inventory count. So I went back, this is actually by Florida Realtors. They gave us a statistic. They went back 10 years. Back in 2008, when we started seeing the downfall, we had at December 31st, 2008, 1556 listings on single-family residence. You can see it jumped up just a little bit in 2009, and it's gone down ever since. So in December 31st, 2017, we had 722 listings. That is our inventory count right now. So, December 31st. So that's one of the things we're having an issue with. And it's a good thing because we're seeing the economy working and everything's selling, but we're having a problem with the inventory. Median prices, at December 2008, we had $195,000 was our median price. In December of 2017, it was $215,000. It's gone up 11%. That is here in Gainesville, and that is based on single-family residents only, and that is in line with what's national. So nationally, we are up 11%, and so locally, we are the same. The number of closed sales in December of 2008, we had 105 single-family in that month. And in December of 2017, we had 273 single-family homes that closed. So we are up 162%. So what are our upcoming hurdles? One of the problems that we have seen, and this came from the National Association of Realtors, is that our home prices are going up, but our income is not. So as we see as a nation, we have a 48% of increase in home prices, but the income is not. And total job openings, actually we ended December 31st, 2017 with 5.8 million open jobs. So you can see this is kind of a little bit of a graph that's pretty interesting, how we still have an opening of a lot of jobs. And one of the other problems is our millennials are having a hard time saving for their down payment. So for first-time buyers, it's 25%. For our repeat buyers, they are pretty good at saving at 7%. And the competition is on. I thought this was interesting because one of the things that we experience at the Gainesville Association of Realtors is the amount of realtors that are coming into the business now. So in 2013, we had 768 local realtor members, and in 2017, we had 1,055 local realtor members. We've increased a little bit. The National Association of Realtors, I went back a little bit farther to 2005 because that was in the boom, 1.2, and now in 2017, we have 1.3. And it's funny, I thought in 2007, when that was really at the end of the boom, we had the highest ever. So you can see we are in line with that right at when we had the boom. And the good news. One of the good news that we're experiencing here in Florida is more global presence. So we're seeing a lot more global happening around in the state. But also here in Gainesville, we actually have a global council, and they're working on getting some more presence in the global industry. And an influence in Florida from hurricanes, I just went to Florida Realtors, and one of the things they said is that they see a little bit of an increase from the Puerto Ricans coming in and not being able to stay on the mainland down there. I don't know that we see that much here in Gainesville, but I know in Orlando they're having a pretty big influctuation of that. New construction happening. We have the new construction that's happening here, even in Gainesville. If you just look around, you certainly can see that. We still have low interest rates. And a real estate agent was actually voted, I don't know if you all see all that, the happiest job by Forbes. So if you are a real estate agent, raise your hand. You have the happiest job. So that's my thing. I just wanted to give you a little bit of statistics. It is good to be a realtor, and thank you very much, and smile on and sell on.
Thank you very much, Susan. All right, next up, we have the commercial side. We just heard from Susan on the residential side. Bo has got a presentation for us, so Bo, come on up and educate us on commercial.
All right. Thank you, thank you. 5 minutes and out. Okay, the overall story is that on the commercial side, all the prices are up, vacancies are down, but the supply is ridiculously low, just like single family. So this is for lease-only, office industrial retail. The median deal is only 1,500 square feet in Gainesville, which basically means, we're a small town, small businesses, lots of entrepreneurship, and the average deal that's always done over and over again is 1,500 square feet. That's a small deal. That's like pathetically small compared to like a Jacksonville or something like that. $15 a square foot gross was about the average rate, which is way up from what it used to be. For years and years and years, it was $11 to $12 a square foot up until a couple years ago. So we've improved quite a bit. They're leasing within 4 months. That used to be 12 to 18 months all day long. And there was only 52 deals done in the entire market, 52 office leases in the whole market of any size by a realtor. Now, there might have been some other ones done, but the majority of the stuff is done by realtors. And that's not a function of demand, it's just supply. There's not a whole lot of deals out there. Same thing on the industrial side, only 2,400 square foot is the size of the average industrial deal, which is quite small. $8.45 is the rate. Just to give you an idea, that's up from about $4 to $5 a square foot for most stuff just a few years ago. And if it was over 20,000 square feet, it was like $3 to $3.50 a square foot. 4 months, it's on the market and gone. Only 29 deals done in the entire market. You can see the same thing for retail. $17 a square foot triple net was the average deal. It's gone in 3.5 months, only 26 deals. Now, on the retail side, that does not include grocery anchored. So none of the Publixes, Winn-Dixie's, Butler Plaza, Celebration Point. Think Thornbrook, La Pavillon, smaller retail centers like that. Next slide, please. This is all about the sale side, same thing. So the average office deal is a little bit bigger than a lease. It's 2,000 square feet, selling for $123 a foot. It used to be $95 to $100 for a long time, okay? So that's way up. And we're doing a lot of deals in the $140 to $160 a square foot range. They're all closing around 90 to 100%. All of them are closing within 4 months. But look how many deals are done. 21 office sales in the entire market of any size by a realtor. 7 for industrial. For retail, you wouldn't even do stats on 5 because that's just too small. On the industrial side, $41 was the closing rate. It's getting up to the 50s, 60s, sometimes 70s now is what it's trending towards. Next slide, please. Okay, so pay attention to me for a second. So this is moving forward. What does the inventory look like? So this is the for lease column. You only have 77 active listings on the entire market for office. So you think about, there's probably anywhere between 15 and 20 square footage ranges that someone might be looking for if they were a business. And you divide that, you've only got 3 or 4 choices per square footage range. So it's really garbage. The good thing is the prices are in equilibrium, right? So the asking prices are $15. We closed at $15 last year, so there should be deals, which means that the 77 that are out there they're either in a bad location or they don't look right or they're not together. Lack of supply. Industrial, same thing. There's only 23 active listings in the entire market. That's nuts. Think about just in the single family side, if you only had 23 of a certain even range, that would be crazy. And look at that. People are paying more than what's on the asking price, which means these are garbage or they're not moving for some reason. Retail, equilibrium on lease rates, but just not a whole lot of stuff. Sales side, you can see same thing. Only 32 active offices for sale. That's pretty much an equilibrium on price. I know there's a delta there, but in our world, that's not a whole lot. Industrial, only 14 active industrial pieces for sale. Like I said, it's trending $55 to $70 a square foot is what we're seeing now, and it's around the same asking price. Retail, we know you need to go over. Next slide. This is just a cool little slide that shows, what a percentage of the deals being done between leases and sales, and overwhelmingly, we're a lease market, right? Because we're a small market, we're a tertiary market, we're little old Gainesville. No one's buying a whole lot of stuff as much, so 71%, 84%, 19%, 81% on industrial, almost everything's a lease here. Of course, multifamily and land are sales. Next slide, which is the last slide, this is the big story. So this is crazy. So office, 12 million in volume. That's sales and leasing combined in the entire market, 12 million last year. Industrial, 4.5, so on and so forth. Look at multifamily. Now, this is sales and leasing combined. So 76%. Now, this was only 10 or 12 sales. Okay, 10 or 12 sales. When an apartment complex sells, those are $15, $20 million sales, right? And so how many offices you have to sell at $120 a foot and a 2,000 square footer to even come close? So you can see why it's overwhelming. Now, what's amazing here is multifamily is classified as an income-producing or investment sale. Anything that's income-producing, right? I'm just showing you multifamily. This doesn't include the shopping centers that produce income. This doesn't count office buildings that produce income. We sold Wells Fargo on Main Street. This doesn't include industrial. I mean, this is just multifamily within one, sort of asset culture, and look at the overwhelming, okay? And multifamily industrial is sort of the cream of the crop right now. Everybody wants it. We get calls from all over the world, and you can see, wow, the sales volume is tremendous. So again, just to repeat, prices are up, which is great. Vacancies are down, but there's terrible supply, and we're having a hard time placing folks because there's only 3 or 4 listings per square footage ranges at any one time. So list, people, if you've got stuff here, all right? Whatever, thank you.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here. I see a number of friends and certainly my family. My beautiful wife, Angela, of 27 years. That's a correction. My fault, Brian, but 27 years. I was over there next to my oldest son, Connor, who is 24. 2 things that I found out as I came in here and I heard, which is great. One, that Forbes says this is the happiest job in America. I guess a realtor. That's news to me. And then the second thing, the second thing is Dave Ferrero is wearing polka dotted underwear. So I don't know what any of that means, but I'm pleased to be here. I will tell you that as one of 5 county commissioners, and 2 commissioners will speak after this, government does not move at the pace of the private sector. It is a slow-moving aircraft carrier that takes a lot of energy and effort to change a direction. I'm pretty proud of the last 3 years and 3 months of my service. We'll get into some of that hopefully today, and I'm looking forward to the debate. He's quite a character, so I'm a little nervous, but I'll get through it. So thank you all for being here.
So, Susan, I also got the same counsel that I should picture folks in their underwear, and I don't think Dave's wearing any. So that's very disturbing in and of itself. Wow. Seriously, though. Well, good evening, and thank you all, as Ken said, for being here. And one thing that I learned in preparing for tonight's debate is a very, very valuable lesson. And that is, if it's October and you see Bo Beery's name on your caller ID, you should let it go to voicemail, lest you find yourself on the stage in February. So you got one bite at that apple. But anyway, Brian gave a very nice introduction of me. It's almost as if I had authored it. And one thing he didn't share is that I am not a native Floridian. I came here to the University of Florida as a freshman back in 1997. That was the first time I said the word y'all. Prior to that, I was from New York State, not New York City, just to be clear. And I am what they call a damn Yankee, which is a northerner that had enough sense to come south and stay. And growing up in New York, we used to come to Florida almost every single summer to go on vacation. And a lot of times that vacation would end up in Orlando at Mickey's house. And like any kid, I loved going to Disney World, and specifically to the Magic Kingdom. And beyond the rides and the attractions at the Magic Kingdom, they used to have, and it's long since closed, and it's a shame because I would have loved to have taken my own kids there, but there was a magic shop on Main Street, USA, on the left-hand side as you approach Cinderella's castle. And I used to love going in there because I loved magic. I wasn't any good at it. I don't have the gift of sleight of hand. I think a little too much hand and not enough sleight. But they would have a magician in there, and he would do tricks for you, and it was all table magic, right up close, and card tricks, and ball and cup tricks, and the shell game where you've got to follow the P. And so you might be wondering, why am I sharing this story? Well, I'll clue you in. So in preparing to debate tonight, I started looking at property taxes, and I looked at my own property tax bill. And, you know, it seems to me to be that P under the shell that's always moving, and you're constantly searching and can never find it. You know, the P might be one year an MSTU, the next year it's an MSBU. It could be a non-ad valorem tax, it could be an ad valorem tax, it could be a fee, it could be an assessment. So it's really hard to pin that down. But you know, one thing that's not magic, one thing that's not an illusion, is that in Alachua County, for 10 years running, we've had the highest property tax rate in the state of Florida. Now, you know, that is true. And one of the tricks that you'll hear is that the reason behind that is the fact that we have so much of our assessed land and assessed value off the tax rolls. Well, for every good illusion, there has to be a little bit of truth, and that is a very true statement. 44% of Alachua County's land that is assessed value is off the tax rolls, and that is indisputable. And it ranks Alachua County in the bottom 10% in the state of Florida in that category. But what you don't hear is that there's other factors at play. You know, if you look in to the Leon County, home of the famous and very well-regarded University of Higher Education, that's of course Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. They have in their county commission budget document a reference to Alachua County. Well, why would they reference Alachua County? Well, because we're closest to them in size and construct, poverty rates, employment, population, and they point to not the revenue side of the equation, but the cost side or the expense side of the equation, and highlight that they run their government 11.4% more efficiently than here in Alachua County. So tonight we're going to talk about property taxes, and we're going to talk about not only the revenue side and what can be levered there, but also the expense side and how we can pull back the veil and unmask the process and hopefully find the P that's moving around in the shell and understand what it is that's causing our property tax situation here in Alachua County and what we can do to combat it.
All right. Question number one, and Ken, we'll start with you. Alachua County has at or among the very highest property tax millage rate in the great state of Florida. Do you believe they're too high, not high enough, about right, and why?
Too high. They're too high. We're talking about spending your money. It's not our money, it's your money. And so every year, we need to look at how can we spend your money better. I've been a commissioner for 3 budget cycles. I am proud of the fact that every budget cycle we were able to lower the millage, some years a little bit, last year a lot. We did the rollback rate, which was the first time this county has done that in 20 years, with the exception of when the legislature told us to do it. And I believe that we need to get more out of each dollar every single year. I'm glad my debater talked about Tallahassee, because anyone that's from Florida knows that whenever they read something from Tallahassee, there's probably some fuzzy math, so we'll get into Tallahassee later. But I think they're too high.
So if I said too low, that would probably not support my
Well,
argument.
I would have a follow-up question.
Well, then I won't go there. No, I agree with Commissioner Cornell. They're too high. And he is absolutely correct in his statement that for the first time in a long time, the county rolled back the millage rate. But what he didn't share with you is that the millage rate on your countywide bill did in fact go down. But for those of us that live in unincorporated Alachua County, the MSTU for sheriff from 2017 to 2018 went up 53%. What he didn't share with you is that there used to be an MSTU for fire services. That MSTU went from 1.7705 last year to 0 this year, which you would think, my goodness, that's a win. But it was transitioned into an MSBU, which is for all of those who are not property tax technophiles. That is a Metropolitan Service business unit, and they use a different calculation methodology. Well, that number this year is in place, and year over year represented a 17% increase in the revenues generated for fire services in the county. For my own tax bill, that represented 17% on my tax bill. So what I thought I was going to get a tax break, I got my tax bill and was surprised to find it 17% higher. So there is some fuzzy math in Tallahassee for sure, but there is also some fuzzy math in Alachua County.
Well, let's start with where we agree. We agree taxes are too high. What are we cutting? Where do we start? Brian, go ahead.
So I think there's, two sides to that equation. There's the revenue side and there's the expense side, and I think we can affect the levers on both. There's three ways on the revenue side. One, you can continue to ratchet millage rates. You can, which those are capped by the state of Florida, as Ken alluded to, but you can also add non-ad valorem assessments and fees, which are euphemisms for taxes. And those have much less restrictions on them in terms of their growth and potential for revenue generation. And you can keep pushing those up and up and up until you have alienated the electorate to the point where they vote in different members to represent them. So that certainly is an option. The other option is to allow what we just saw in the report from Susan and Bo, that market forces will drive real estate prices up. But again, even that has a limited effect because there's restrictions by the legislature on how much property assessed values can raise year over year by which you're taxed. I would argue that the best vehicle is to improve the value of the property that is on the tax rolls here in Alachua County, which is 56% of them. And I think there's a real opportunity that was lost back in March of 2016 when a 3-2 vote put down Envision Alachua that would have had a multi-billion-dollar impact to the bottom line of this community. And if we want to embrace the notion of affordable housing and closing the income gap and creating opportunity, then we have to have employment opportunities for folks. We have to have education and training for those folks. And it's not 4 years degrees, it's technical training so that they can go into advanced manufacturing, which is one of the things that Envision Alachua promised for the community. And we can't say that we want one thing and then act another way. And so I think that's on the revenue side, certainly. And then on the expense side, Tallahassee and Leon County, they operate at an 11.4% lesser rate than we do for a comparable sized community. They have a better FTE ratio per 1,000 residents. They operate at 6.1 compared to our 7.6. That translates to 199 FTEs more for 25,000 fewer residents. Is Tallahassee's level of service right? Is our level of service right? I don't know. But I can tell you that there is certainly opportunity to cut on costs and pick the right levers to pull on the revenue side.
Ken.
Every department, we have to look at every single department with regards to cutting costs, and that's what we do. One of the benefits of when folks leave or find a different job is we have this thing called vacancies. Vacancies are things that you can either fill immediately or fill slowly. What it really does, though, is it provides an opportunity for each department to figure out where they can do things better and fill the gaps. I want to get back to Leon County, because I think since we've spent a little bit of time on Leon County, I think it's important to go ahead and pull out the Leon County fiscal year 2018 adopted budget. I just want to kind of go through it, a few parts of it. So on page 5-66, we've got the local option sales tax. I just want to read to you what Leon County says about that. Local government infrastructure sales tax is a 1-cent sales tax on all transactions up to $5,000. Effective December 2004, the sales taxes are dispersed 80% to the Blueprint 2000. We may talk about the Blueprint 2000, but that's something that the voters approved 18 years ago in Tallahassee, and then in November of 2014, the sales tax was extended for another 20 years. So they have a penny extra on local option sales tax. In addition, they have a half-cent sales tax for local government, which is an additional revenue source, talking about the revenue side. On the MS BU, which is a municipal service, it's actually benefit unit. The Tallahassee also has a half-cent, half-mil municipal service benefit unit or taxing unit for those folks that live outside of Tallahassee. Brian is exactly right. We eliminated that last year, and the reason we eliminated that is for a number of reasons, but we replaced that with a fire assessment. We can talk more about that, but let me just stay focused on Tallahassee. So when you look at Tallahassee's millage rate, their millage rate is 8.3144. They get an extra penny on their sales tax. As you know, we have 6.5, they have 7.5. They also have a 0.5 millage for their fire. So that compares to when you add the half to the regular, that's 8.814. That's their millage. Alachua County's millage is 8.4648. So that's less. Still too high, but it's less than Leon County. In addition to that, when you look at the millage rates for the surrounding counties that surround Alachua County, and we'll get into maybe a question about that, I pulled just the 6 surrounding counties. So Putnam County is 9.8892. Bradford is, and I confirmed it with the commissioner who's here today, 9.11. Union's maxed out there at 10. Gilchrist is at 9.5. Levy's at 9.0, and we do have one that's less than us. That's Columbia County. They're at 8.015. So certainly, I believe we need to continue to look for ways to lower our millage. But when you look at the surrounding 6 counties, we're less than all of them except for Columbia. And when you add the half mil for fire in Tallahassee, we're actually less than Tallahassee's. Let's talk about Tallahassee's population. And I do believe it is the closest comparable to Alachua County. So Tallahassee has a population, Leon County of 284,000. We're about 260,000. Tallahassee's 187,000. Gainesville's about 130. Again, their sales tax is 7.5. Ours is 6.5. And their millage rate with their MSBU is a little bit higher. In addition to their MSBU on their fire, they also have a fire assessment. When you look to their document, it says this fee is adopted in June of 2009. So Tallahassee has had a fire assessment in Leon County since 2009. And what they do is they charge a flat fee to single-family homes on a square foot basis. So we may get into some details about the fire assessment. Since my opponent brought it up, I'd like to talk about it because actually it is something that 3 of our commissioners had to decide to do last year. And it's going to take 3 again to continue it. And the 3 commissioners that decided to do it last year have all committed to each of you, because again, it's your money, that it would not be raised. Those 3 commissioners are Commissioner Cornell, myself, Pinkerton, and Hutchinson.
All right, well, for the briefest of moment, I'd like to get away from the subjects of Tallahassee and Dave's underwear. So if we could instead...
We have confirmed Dave is wearing underwear.
No,
All right, let's give it...
We're going to leave that one alone, mercifully. I'm now going to be selfish in picking the next question. I got to spend a good amount of time talking about infrastructure over the last year. So I want to talk a little bit about roads. Some critics would point to the backlog in road maintenance as evidence of poor budgeting of taxpayer dollars. Do you agree with that? Or if not, what would you, do you agree with that or not? And what would you argue is the cause of the backlog and how do we get out of it? I'll start with you, Ken.
Thank you, Brian, and certainly I want to thank you for the time you spent with this community through the Chamber's I-3 initiative. It was good for everyone to kind of go through and understand. When it comes to roads, since I was elected, I've said we need to fix our roads. We need to spend more money on our roads. In fact, we need to spend more money this year than we spent last year. We need to spend more money on our roads next year than we spend this year. That's been a mantra of mine, and in the first year we did that. In the second year we did that. In the third year we did that, and it's my hopes that next year we'll also do that. We've kind of got a goal of about increase the roads budget 10% at a minimum each year. If we can do more, let's do more. And so is that bad budgeting? I don't know if it's bad budgeting in the past. I will tell you going forward that it is my goal to continue to spend more money and prioritize our spending on roads. We had some gas tax negotiations with the city. For any of you that watch more than one show on Channel 12, God bless you. Our priority with the city on the gas taxes, the county has its biggest need is repairing roads. The city's biggest needs is transit. We had a robust negotiation, and I was proud that our county commission and the city came to an agreement where we didn't get the same amount, but we didn't get we didn't have to reduce it as much as what the city would have liked us to reduce. And I guess I'll stop there. I got more, but time's of the essence.
Well, I appreciate that. So I think it is fantastic that the county commission has finally recognized that for a very long time, measured in not years but in decades, they have ignored our county road infrastructure. It's on display everywhere you drive in our county. And it's great that in the tenure of Commissioner Cornell, there has been an effort to put money towards road repair. I believe the budget this year for road maintenance and repair is somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.7 million.
General fund.
General fund. At 10% per year, it's going to take 15 years to get to the point at which we can even begin to make a dent in what the county Public Works Department has indicated is our annual need in order to just stay here in terms of road maintenance and repair. I don't mean adding lane miles and increasing capacity. I'm just talking about fixing roads before they deteriorate to the point where you can no longer drive them and they need to be replaced. You know, the lane mile replacement cost is about $1 million a mile compared to $200,000 to $300,000 a mile to mill and resurface. And our roads are slowly, or rather quickly, approaching the point at which the $200,000 to $300,000 option will be off the table, and it'll be $1 million a mile roads throughout the county. And so I would challenge that we have got to find a place in our county budget to cut spending in other locations so that we can enhance and increase from 10% a year to 50% a year to 100% a year towards road infrastructure projects, which are absolutely mission critical to our community being able to thrive and move commerce and people to and from the places of employment and where they live, work, and play.
So following up with that on and it was kind of asked in the first question, but what ideas do you have in terms of where that money might come from? And let's suspend, the conversation for the moment of, we're going to quickly increase the revenue level, right? Let's talk about existing funds. Where might those dollars come from to jump from 3.7 to say $10 million?
Well, without some really courageous leadership on the commission during this next budget cycle, I don't know that that's possible. Tallahassee, they did pass an infrastructure sales tax called Blueprint 2000. And here in this community, we acknowledged that it would be very challenging to catch up to the road deficit that we have allowed ourselves to get into, which is measured in the hundreds of millions of dollars simply on property tax alone, and that a sales tax was the only viable solution. And unfortunately, as a community, we have not rallied behind that effort to have our own equivalent of Blueprint 2000. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there is a disconnect and a lack of trust between the folks that would be asked to vote for it and the leadership at the county for how those dollars would be expended. But the short answer is an infrastructure sales tax will help us get to where we need to be in terms of our global road issue, but there can be incremental changes above and beyond 10% a year that can help us get there quicker.
Don't disagree with that answer. And with regards to 10%, that's a goal. You know, when I first got on the commission, if you look back at the general fund that we were spending on roads, I believe it was less than $500,000. So the number you quoted, $3.5 million, has certainly been, I'm not going to say it's been courageous. It's been good. It needs to be more. The primary funding source for roads and for most of the counties around the state is a sales infrastructure tax. We've asked the voters, or previous commissions have asked the voters, do you want to pay more for roads? They've said no. I've heard them loud and clear. And so I certainly don't intend to put that back on the ballot to ask them again, because that has been told to us, certainly not this term. That being said, we can be more efficient in our public works. We can make sure that when we say we're going to do a road project, that we actually do the road project. When we wait, it costs money. The one that has caused me the most frustration, but I've been assured that it will begin before the summer, is Tower Road. It's one that we've needed to pave for a long, long time. And so what we did 2 years ago is we were able to find some grant money from the state for a multimodal path, $1 million that would provide a multimodal path from DOT. What that did is that enabled us to then say, well, if we're going to have a multimodal path, then perhaps we don't need to spend $50 million to repave Tower Road. We can just repave Tower Road. We can add some turnouts. And so the commission will be doing that. How's that?
That's good. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome.
I'll go now back to my script. Obviously, there's been criticism with regard to the counties moving some costs that originally were in the millage rate and then naming them as fees or assessments on the tax bill instead. Do you believe that moving the counties to income to fee or assessment as opposed to millage rate is a good idea, or is it bad, and why? Brian. Sorry, do you need clarification?
No, I was just going to,
You're just ready?
well,
You just sit tight.
okay.
You'll
Yeah.
get your chance.
Always
I didn't
listen to
wanna- I didn't
your,
wanna have to do
always
that.
listen to your insurance agent.
So, the question is transparency and accountability, and I go back to the shell game and trying to find the P. You look at your tax bill 1 year, and you see that you've got, especially if you live in unincorporated Alachua County, you've got your BOCC line item, you've got your MSTU for sheriff, you've got your MSTU for general government, you've got your MSTU for fire services, and then you're told, hey, we're going to be cutting your taxes. Don't worry about it. We're going to roll back the millage rate. Well, most people don't understand what that means in its entirety. They hear that and they think, well, my tax bill is going to go down. My tax burden is lowering. But the reality is that when you move from those MSTU ad valorem taxes, which have some control in terms of how much year over year they can increase, and they're more regulated by the legislature, and you move them down into fees and assessments like MSBUs and fire assessment fees and stormwater fees, then you start to be able to manipulate the overall bottom line of the county in terms of receipts that are yielded from properties. So for example, in 2016, the ad valorem millage rate receipts for the county, $131 million. This year, in 2017, $129 million. Well, my goodness, you'd think that's good news. $2 million less, the county gave me my tax cut. But if you look at the rest of the story and you look for where the P actually is under the shell, you see that the other line item, that is the non-ad valorem, went from $24 to $33 million. And so again, for my tax bill, that was 17%. If you look at fire MSTU from 2016 to the fire assessment in 2017, it's a 44% increase. The sheriff's MSTU went from 2 and change to 3 and change. That's significant dollars, and it doesn't really reflect a tax break. One part, yes, but the entirety certainly has gone up. And when you look at folks like us, yeah, maybe a few $100s in the course of a year is not going to make or break you. But for folks that are paycheck to paycheck, that are part of the recently released disparity study that was a combined effort between 7 major groups with the county that show the real disparity. In fact, You look at a number of sources throughout this community, from articles in the Gainesville Sun to our poverty rate to the recently released report. There is a desperate need in this community for good paying jobs and better education for folks. And for instance, someone that lives in Linton Oaks that's spending 3 hours on a bus getting to their job where they're earning barely a living wage, they can't afford for their rent to go up even the slightest increment, and yet the apartment they live in is levied that same MSBU, that same fire assessment, and the landlord is not out of the kindness of their heart going to absorb it. It's going to be passed on. And so you have to look at the incremental impact that every one of these tax increases has, again, not necessarily on us, but certainly on the working poor.
Transparency, same reason, although I have a different take on it. I believe what we did last year actually brings significantly more transparency. I believe it also allows for everybody to pay their fair share. Under the MSTU fire, if you had a home that was less than $50,000 to $100,000, because of your exemptions, you didn't pay anything for fire services. But when you dialed 911, fire trucks came. So I believe we went from less transparent to actually more transparent. When you looked at the sheriff's budget, which you brought up, part of that was in the general fund and part of that was in the MSTU law enforcement. What we did is we actually moved all of that into the MSTU law enforcement, which explains the increase, so that you could see exactly what you were paying for law enforcement. So last year, before the change, we had a general fund, we had a MSTU for law enforcement, we had an MSTU for fire, we had an MSTU for unincorporated. What we did is we said, let's get rid of the fire, replace it with a fire assessment. By the way, Leon County has one, and every professional fire service in Alachua County also has one. Let's show people that when they pay what they're getting for fire with an assessment. So let's eliminate that MSTU. And let's also eliminate the MSTU unincorporated. Let's move everything that the sheriff wants out of the general fund so you can see exactly when she would like more money or less. And we have simplified your tax bill from 4 MSTUs that are subject to your ad valorem to actually 2, the general fund and law enforcement. Fire is now a fire assessment, and I'm glad you brought up stormwater assessment. Stormwater assessment, we added last year, average $25 per house. What that allowed us to do, because we now have a funding source, is we can now leverage additional funds from Tallahassee to bring money into this community. It was a small assessment, but it was a necessary assessment, and it was necessary because the money that we were spending on our stormwater, it was coming from our gas tax. And we all know, based on the last discussion, that we need more money for our roads. So that's what we did last year. I think it provides greater transparency. I think it simplifies your tax bill. And for those that weren't paying their fair share, I think now they're paying their fair share.
Thank you. So want to open it up. If anybody has a question.
Y'all can clap if you like that.
See, there you
Yeah,
go.
I mean, you don't have to, but.
Captain Underpants. Yes, sir. Your question.
So my question
Is that Dave Farrow?
this is Dave Farrell. Yes, I'm not going to So the question is, do you think it's better for the county to own as much land as it does, or to put the land back in the private sector? For example, there was a time where the private sector took care of vehicle maintenance for the county, and they had employees that were mechanics that worked for employers that paid taxes. And then at some point, the county made a decision, you know what, we need fleet maintenance at the county level. And they closed all those private businesses by creating a county department of fleet maintenance, which completely took jobs away from the private sector and created a lot more jobs that were government jobs and took property off the tax roll. Do you agree that the county, especially in a place where the University of Florida is so important, do you agree that the county should get out of the business of land ownership and get back into the business of, letting the private sector do what the private sector can do? Thank you.
Yeah, so, me. Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I appreciate that. I think to the extent that county can do it more efficient than the private sector, again, it's your money. So if county can do it more efficiently and you would like us to, then the county should look at that. Generally, the private sector can be more efficient at certain services. I know that the sheriff's office has a fleet department. I know the University of Florida has a fleet department. Certainly, our public works has a fleet department. If someone could prove to me that by outsourcing that, that would be better for the taxpayers, I'd be happy to look at it.
So I think it's hard to imagine that the county government or most any government can do something more efficiently than the private sector. But I'm sure there are instances, and there are definitely roles and places for where county and municipal governments have to step in and manage. You know, it's more than just a function of where services are done, Dave. You know, is it outsourced? Is it not? You know, that speaks to somewhat of government efficiency and helping with that cost side of the equation. How can we bring the budget down? But the other part is, and it's one of those three areas where I talked about on the revenue side, if we would roll back some of these burdensome regulations that have been passed, you know, you look at the most recent wetland ordinance. You know, wetlands were not threatened in Alachua County thanks to the state of Florida, their Department of Environmental Protection, and the water management districts that regulate water both in the ground and on the ground in the state of Florida. They have wetland buffers in place. They have protections in place. What Alachua County did 2 weeks ago was extend those buffer zones to where it makes it very difficult for certain properties, especially in eastern Alachua County, to have the opportunity to improve those land values and create opportunity centers for employment for folks that are right now, at best, making minimum wage working at jobs in retail and restaurant when they thrive for something much, much more. And so what we've got to do is we've got to find opportunities to create good development in the eastern parts of the county, in the central parts, in municipal infill, in the urban environment, and out in western county to increase property values above where they are now, because that really will solve the problem. And, you know, for instance, if you recall, and we might hear about this a little bit later, there was a group called GREC. They had a small wood-burning stove up on 441. Well, a while back, last fall, the city was entertaining the notion of buying GREC. And do you know who stomped their feet the absolute loudest? It was the county commission. Why? Because GREC and the biomass plant represents a huge amount of value, both in terms of real value and tangible property, that generated $2.8 million in 2017 for the county coffers. So obviously there's a recognition of the value of improved land, the value of real property, the value of tangible property. And so if we unleash that opportunity to happen, you know, Alachua County is not exactly known to be friendly to developers and has a reputation that makes it very difficult to attract folks to come in here. When we bring them to the county, they're met oftentimes with obstacles and no. Now, credit to the city of Gainesville and their introduction to the Department of Doing. And they are doing some phenomenal things that are incentivizing and enabling and accelerating development, which is phenomenal. And I would strongly encourage the county to follow the city's model in that regard.
Who else? Questions?
Hi. I'd really like to get your feedback concerning the concept of abatements extended to those businesses that are from outside the area to encourage them to come into the area. I'm of the mind that if the taxes can and should be abated to encourage economic growth in a given area, whatever governmental organization has that authority, it would seem to me that maybe that abatement ought to be granted to the taxpayers who are here, who have been part of this community for so long, and I'm curious what your feedback might be on that.
Well, I think everybody's taxes should be abated in the county. And, you know, it's true that when folks that are coming in from outside, they want to make the, quote, numbers work and pencil out a lot of times burdensome regulations and high taxes are the difference. And so property tax abatement for new entrants into the market is an important way to incentivize economic development and opportunity. And then you get the multiplier effect of those new businesses as they enter the community. And eventually those abatements subside and they join the rest of the fray. But certainly utilizing abatements for companies when they're trying to be retained here in the community, you know, it wasn't too long ago that we almost lost nationwide insurance. Exactech has other facilities in Florida. They could very easily relocate, and thank goodness that they have made the commitment to stay here in Alachua County, not just for the good that they do for our tax base, but the good that they do across the entire community through their philanthropic efforts. And so if we need to add abatement programs to incentivize companies to stay and grow here in Alachua County, so be it. But candidly, we all need property tax abatement. And the way we do it is we get more, higher, and better use value for the property in the county, and then we'll conquer the spending side of the problem another day.
So I'm against corporate subsidies, and when I hear the word abatement, I hear corporate subsidy. So I'm against giving an out-of-town company a tax abatement or corporate subsidy that you all pay for with your taxes. I'm not for that. Now, what I am for, though, creating local jobs. Every QTI that the state has offered with regards to incentives, we've approved. So I'm for those types of things. But in general, to give an out-of-town company a tax break that we all have to pay for, if we're going to do that, we should do it locally.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. We appreciate it. We're going to move on to the GRU conversation. I'm sorry. You both get a minute. I'm sorry. I stole your minute.
I can be
1 minute
quick.
summation, if you don't mind, Ken.
Okay, so first of all, thank you all for being here, for having me. I look forward to continuing to talk with you one-on-one. I did file for re-election last week, so I've got some petitions. I need about 1,779 to get back on the ballot. I'm going to ask Brian to sign one after this. He said he might. I'm also going to give him a button. And I appreciate, let me, in all seriousness, I'm born and raised in Alachua County. As many of you know, I've worked with many of you on real estate and in other things. And serving as your representative is truly an honor. And while it is a challenging job, improving the community that we all call home is something that I couldn't think of I'd be rather be doing. So thank you for giving me that opportunity, and I will be asking for your vote in the future.
Well, Ken, I count at least 9 signatures that you're good for based on the T-shirts. But seriously, it's an important topic. It's a very dry topic. There's a lot of data. All of this represents research that I've done, and I wish that I could have gotten to it all and not had you glass over with your eyes. It's tedious, and the only way that we're going to affect change is to be engaged, and not just occasionally tuning in to Channel 12, but showing up, being engaged at the commission meetings and being engaged at the ballot box and making sure that we're putting people in office that understand the importance of changing the paradigm in this community to make sure that everybody has opportunity and that we're not known across the state and across the country as the highest tax rate county in the state.
Thank you both. Great job. Like I said, that obviously isn't, that's not easy. It's so much harder than we ought to cut taxes. It just is, because you can't do one and then turn around and say, but we need more money to fix roads, right? So anyways, thank you both. Okay, we've got a second act. We're going to talk about GRU and utility governance. So I'd invite our next 2 participants to come on up.
So we're here to talk tonight about the governance referendum that's going to be on the November 26, 2018 ballot, and I'm going to read it to you. The referendum that you will see on the ballot, if you live in the city of Gainesville, because only city voters are going to vote on this, is, and I'm going to read it in its entirety, I quote, "Shall the charter of the city of Gainesville be amended to create the Gainesville Regional Utilities Authority," they also call themselves the authority, "as the governing board of Gainesville Regional Utilities, whose responsibilities shall include but not be limited to examining and establishing utility rates for all customers. Board members shall be GRU customers, shall be diverse and representative of the community, and shall be nominated by citizens and appointed by the Gainesville City Commission." Yes or no? Pretty simple, huh? What those 70 words of this referendum do not reveal is the content of the other 14 pages of House Bill 759, or HB 759. This was crafted in Tallahassee without any local public input. What people don't know are the details of what the Gainesville Regional Utilities Authority, or the authority, is empowered to do. But before we can talk about any kind of new and improved governing system, it helps to clarify how GRU is currently governed. First, let me dispel a myth. I've heard very often people grousing about, the city commission doesn't know how to run a utility. The city commission does not run the utility. The general manager does. The 7 elected officials who make up the commission serve as the board of directors of that enterprise that is GRU, and they have the power to hire and fire the general manager of the utility. This parallels the private sector. So the general manager of GRU is the equivalent of a CEO who oversees, runs, and manages the day-to-day operations of the corporations. In this case, we're talking about a utility company. And just as in the private sector, the general manager doesn't do it alone. He has upper and middle management staff. This includes a CFO, a COO, legal counsel, and a 10-member leadership team. The people who run each component of GRU, water, wastewater, stormwater, the telecommunications, natural gas, coal, biomass, these are all industry experts. They are all credentialed professionals who could just as easily be hired at FPL or Duke Energy. The general manager reports to the city commission, just as a corporate CEO reports to his or her board of directors. 2 years ago, the Utility Advisory Board, or UAB, and so forgive me if I slip into acronyms, the UAB was created through local ordinance to act in an advisory capacity to confer with GRU management and staff to make recommendations to the City Commission on all aspects of GRU, including setting rates. The 7-member board was appointed by the City Commission. They serve up to 2 four-year terms. They include professionals in the field of law, finance, economics, utility management, business management, and engineering. The City Commission takes recommendations from the UAB and the general manager. They discuss them in public meetings, they take public input, and then they make their policy and budget decisions. With this outline of the current GRU governance system, we can begin the discussion about House Bill 759, its governance referendum, and how it would be structured if it were to pass. While the elected City Commission is the current final decision-making body on utility policy, the members of the authority would become, if it passes, would become the final decision makers. And I do want to make a point here. If you hear from anybody that if this passes, your utility bills are going to go down, there's nothing in here that mandates that. There is nothing in here that says GRU rates need to be at a certain level. It does not mandate or direct or require by law that your rates will go down or your bills will go down. If you hear from anybody that that's what's going to happen, so please vote for this, you're being lied to. So there are many other areas of real concern in addition to that, but don't take my word for it. The city attorney of the city of Gainesville worked with other charter officers to prepare a 10-page document. It's called the Impact Statement and Analysis. By the way, this document is public record, so if you want a copy of it, just contact the clerk's office or email me. I'll be happy to send you the PDF. The introduction of this document includes this statement, quote, "This memorandum is based on facts and our professional opinions, and every effort was made to avoid taking an advocacy position. In simple terms, we read the bill together with the provisions of the city charter and tried to figure out what this would cost the city and how we could make this work if it becomes law. So I'm going to summarize the 10 pages into some bullet points. So bear with me, I'm going to run through these pretty quickly. On whether it will increase or decrease revenue, cannot be ascertained. Cost of implementation to the city cannot be ascertained. Economic advantages or disadvantages cannot be ascertained. Impacts on governmental services cannot be ascertained. Labor and employment issues, problematic and probably unlawful. Sunshine Law does not recognize or allow for exemptions that are provided by state law. Utility-related ordinances. The authority cannot have legislative powers to adopt or amend city utility ordinance. That's by state constitution. But House Bill 759 denies the city commission any authority to do so. So how do you amend any ordinances? On fiduciary matters, the bill is silent on duties owed to the city. The bill does not address the financial liability that the authority creates, and it does not address the authority's ability to sue or be sued. It grants the authority the ability to dispose of utility assets, but this is prohibited by state constitution. Real quick, I'm almost done, real quick. So on removal from office, how do you remove a board member? The city commission is not allowed to remove any authority members for saying exercising bad judgment. And the authority decision-making is greatly insulated, which may lead to less accountable decision-making. So here's how I want to sum this up. Everybody in this room, you're all business people. You deal with contracts and legal relationships all the time. So as business professionals, would you enter into any contract that has this much uncertainty? Would you advise your clients to sign on to anything as unpredictable and possibly with unlawful impacts? Of course not. And neither should the city voters in Gainesville.
Thank you. Todd.
Thank you. I was going to say I yield 1 minute of my time to the gentle lady from District 3, but
Thank you.
I feel like we're in Congress here. No.
Okay, I'm done.
Thank you for having us all. You know, it was a little almost 7 years ago to the date that Commissioner Botcher, Susan, and I were elected and took office together. And as the Grateful Dead said, what a long, strange trip it's been. I tried to take a 1-year sabbatical to completely detoxify my soul and my body after serving for 6 years. I've made it 9 months, and I realized in preparing for this many weeks ago that I've started getting facts and figures together. And if everybody ever saw me in office, I tended to do that. Some would say too much. But I just want to talk to you as a person. I want to talk to you about why I feel this is important and how we got here. You know, I've got more time. I'm doing new things. My wife and I said when I got elected that I had 2 7th graders and a 6th grader. If I made it 6 years, I'd have 3 in college, and I do. So we're at 7 o'clock to 7:30 every night. My wife and I look at each other, and we're like, what do you want to do? So we've been watching Game of Thrones. Finally, and it reminds me of physics class in high school. I mean, I'm there in class, I'm watching, I'm paying attention, and I honestly don't have first clue what the hell's going on. All right, here's my jokes. Okay, so my first experience as city commissioner, plenty of stuff I didn't know, but I understood business a little bit. I knew Excel. I knew numbers and finances, and I did my orientation with the CFO at the time of the utility. And we'll never forget, after 4 hours of questions and learning and stuff, her saying, I said, you must have to do this all the time. And she's like, no, I've never had a person ask me those kind of questions and understand it all. And I remember that was the first time I realized, you know, this maybe isn't the best thing for the city commission to manage, this utility. It's complicated. And that's where we'll talk about the bill. If we don't get into the intricacies of the bill and how it works, listen, we changed the governance of our federal government every 4 to 8 years or so completely. We can figure this one out. So the little nuances and intricacies, I was on the commission when we asked the attorney to put this little paper together that she did. As you would imagine, we didn't ask her to put a paper together about everything that might be good about it, right? So that doesn't exist. You know, I think that the people that are opposed to even the thought of this, they remind me of myself going through life as a Catholic. I was taught certain things, and I was closed-minded, and I would not even think about it. And at some point, I got older, I started thinking about new things, and I started saying, at least, does this make sense? And I think when you look at the facts around governance of a public utility of GRU size, you realize, hey, it's not crazy. 70 to 80% of all utilities in this country, municipal utilities of the size of GRU, are managed in the manner in which this bill tries to put forth, not city commissions. And there's a reason for it. Commissioner Hawkins, former Commissioner Hawkins, went to Tallahassee every year. He's passionate about this not happening, and he would talk a story about 1905 and Gainesville promising free water to get the University of Florida to come here. And I appreciate that. And as a matter of fact, it was his like great-grandfather or something, which is pretty cool. But it's 2018, and we have more than 5,000 people that live in Gainesville. It is very complicated. Commissioner Bodger said that the city commission does not run it. That is 180 degrees counter to what I observed in 6 years. Time after time after time again, we go against better judgment of the utility professionals. We've made some big errors in that, as everybody knows. The utility manager, at the end of the day, has no more power than our children to be independent while they're 10 or 12 years old. I mean, we try to get them to do things, but they're not empowered. We've had multiple general managers removed for various different reasons. And so I think when you look at this, the American Public Power Association does a study every year in 2015. They talked about the governance models of utilities, and this is the de facto standard. And so to have hysteria, like some of the commissioners are trying to get hysterical about it, and you hear about Tallahassee takeovers and whatnot. I've been a part of this discussion for 7 years. I was open-minded. At one point, I was against it. I was for it. At one point, I was against it because the city commission that I was serving with promised to make some changes that we quite frankly didn't. Because as we all know, as regular people that have busy lives, that work our jobs and raise our families, politicians will say stuff till we go away, but they won't take action. And the city commission has not taken the kind of action that they've promised and that they've said. And so I think this is an important issue. I think this is probably one of the most important issues for the future of our community long term. And that is to not remove politics as one of the questions in this that you have. Not to remove it, but to limit it. And so, what's that?
Don't be working ahead, man.
Sorry. So I honestly, I believe it is a worthy thing. I think we can get into some details as your questions are going to guide us to on why, but I can assure you that this is not some crazy idea. The city commission had every ability in the world to put an amendment on the ballot for people to vote for and did not. They did not, and they will not. And I just want to present, if you leave here tonight, I want you to know that the manner in which this is suggesting we run this utility, manage utility, is the standard and norm in this country. It's okay. We're going to be okay. Kevin Bacon, Animal House, last scene. Remain calm. It will be okay.
All right, thank you. You guys. Remind me not to get stuck underwater with you guys for 5 minutes. All right, so having answered really the first two questions that I had, thanks for nothing. So whether you support the idea of what's going on the ballot, there being a governing UAB, or if you think it's a bad idea, tell us why you think your position yields a better outcome to the ratepayers of GRU. And we'll start, Todd, you go first.
Sure. I mean, this is something that, so again, look at what a utility is. I think you can argue that any of them, but, GRU has a monopoly on what I would argue are two of life's most essential things, electricity and water. Certainly, you can now start making the argument about telecommunications, and they also control your wastewater, and then finally natural gas. And I think that the process of managing that, the first and foremost, the priority should be providing safe, reliable service at an affordable or competitive rate. And let that be the benchmark and the hallmark. That doesn't mean you just don't care about your community. It doesn't mean that you don't care about your planet. It doesn't mean, but you carefully look at things and you realize and you understand that there are people out there. There are low-income people out there. There are people's mothers at home who are told they're going to be on oxygen the rest of their life, and they live in a crappy home in Turkey Creek Forest, and their power bill goes up $20 a month. Those are real stories. And so the city commission for years we have the debates over who should have the lower rates if you use less. Anybody raise a family and have 3 of their children leave the house and watch their GRU bill plummet downwards? It has happened to me. I'm living the argument I made for years, which is we punish families because we punish on use, we punish on that kind of thing, and it is a better, I think it is a better outcome, and it is a better run utility and organization that is not, again, free of politics, not free of personal views and values and opinions, but we don't have the constant up and down the debates over, who among us should pay more, who among us should pay less, and why. We fought hard for that. And again, I mean, another example is the current commission has more than a couple, I think, commissioners who want to go back to rate structure. I've heard talks of a 5-tier rate structure. And it's just, it needs to stop. I mean, there's a word there, politicization of the utility, to me, honestly, became something that it made me sick in my time in office because of knowing how important this is to so many people. And we haven't even talked about commercial rates, but so I think it is it's not going to happen overnight. So to where I would agree with, because I've never heard it. I've never heard anybody that's legitimately for this looking at anybody to say it's going to lower your rates. So it's, I mean, because we got a long, that's going to be some heavy sledding to lower our rates here. We can talk about that later. So I think it'll be a better run, limit the political constant back and forth of ideologies, and let's provide safe, reliable service at an affordable, competitive rate.
Okay, absolutely. I think GRU does provide extremely reliable service. I've been a GRU customer for 40 years. I don't think I ever remember there being a brownout. I don't think I ever remember being told I have to boil my water before I drink it. Anyway, so getting back to one of the points that was brought up about how so many other utilities, peer utilities that serve a large number of customers, how they're governed. And one of the kind of cluster of utility companies that are often brought up are Fort Pierce, New Smyrna Beach, Jacksonville, Kissimmee, and Orlando. And so when you look at exactly what their governing boards look like, they say that they're independent, there's dependent independent, and then there's different variations of it. So for example, JEA, which is huge, that's county-wide. GRU only serves Gainesville and then the urban fringe area. Excuse me. With JEA, Jacksonville Energy Authority, the authority is retained by the city council through budget, their debt limits, their general fund transfer, any ordinance or charter changes, and removal of board members. That's retained by the city council and the mayor. And each one of those different peer cities, and this is, I believe this is true across the nation, as Todd referred to, yes, there are a lot of utility companies in the similar size of GRU's customer base of, what is it, like 93,000? Is that right? That they have a different board structure than just the city commission. And so I think what we want to do is we want to look at what fits in this, what fits in our community, what serves our customers best. And I'll just do a very quick side comment because I think there's a future question about the now you got me tripping over the word. How politics can infect, the city commission, or how politics can infect actually an independent board of political appointees. Let's focus on that. But I think it's important to understand that when you customize what works in this community, when you involve each one of you and people, in East Gainesville in the decision-making process of how we want our utility governed, it's going to serve the people best, regardless of what the outcome is. One of the objections that many people have to House Bill 759 is that it was basically cobbled together in private. There were no public meetings prior to it starting to go through the committee process in Tallahassee, none. I actually made a public records request of, it was when now Senator Keith Perry was Representative Keith Perry, I made a public records request of the bill at certain drafting stages because I wanted to see what was going on. There were a lot of people interested. They wanted to know how this was being crafted together. And I was told that that information is not public. It's private. And I don't get to see it before anybody else publicly gets to see it, which means until it's made it through its bill drafting process, it goes then to committee, and that's when they start having the public hearings on it, and by that time, the train has left the station. So when you craft something here in the community with public input, you're going to get something that's much better suited for us. What we're talking about here is not something that you cannot look at what's in House Bill 759 and say, this is the way New Smyrna Beach did it, or this is the way Austin did it, because it's not. This is a very, very different and very restricted bill.
And I get it. But
Fine, go ahead. Do your
Yeah,
thing.
I want to ask a question, not necessarily on governance. Now I'm doing it for the moment. But
Say politicization.
yeah, no. But I want to talk about rates because you mentioned it with regard to we're not sure whether this would change rates or not. And there's no guarantee per the bill, right? But having both served on the city commission, you're great to ask this question. What can be done to reduce rates now that we know where things stand? I'll start with you.
Actually, I tried doing a little research on that. I called the general manager, Ed Bilarski, and spoke with him. And so let's go back to how this all started. Back in 2013, when the Chamber of Commerce released their energy study report. And they had 4 metrics of or recommendations of what they wanted out of GRU, one of them being governance. And the other 3 was, rates at the standard deviation of what's the state, that kind of thing, general fund transfer rate, excuse me, and the last one was fuel adjustment charges. And so when I read to him out of the energy study report, the Chamber's report, I said, where are we on all of these? He said, we've met all of those. The general fund transfer, I think when we were first in office was 11 something, it was like 11.9%. And the Chamber report said, get it down to 9 or below. And we did. I think the first year we got the general fund transfer down to that. And it still is that. It's actually below 9% now. And so those different things about bringing the rates down into what would be considered normal and average have been achieved. And that was through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on the commission from the time we were on and through to the present day. So did I answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I also think that, so the way I would say we limit or lower rates is to stop eating McFlurries. So, because when you want to lose weight,
Yeah.
you can't go get that McFlurry like I do. And what I mean by that is if you want to lower your rates, you got to quit raising your rates. You got to quit taking action after action after action that raises the rates. And one of the things that the city commission asked the governing body of the utility did many years ago, prior to 2011 all, was change the fundamental core way they decided to do projects and all. They took the rate impact out of it and basically were allowed to incorporate community values and whatnot, whatever that might be. If anyone here truly understood the magnitude and the insanity of the solar feed-in tariff, you would be floored. I just heard today about a building that's for sale that has solar on it, and I said, is it solar feed-in tariff? Does that come with it? I mean, no. I was like, okay. I don't know if people understand the cost of that program alone. There's other things that we've done along the way. We keep talking about electric, water and other things. We've got to watch all of the rates. But what I'll tell you is that my time in office wasn't about lowering rates. It was about lowering the massive increases that were coming. And anyone out there who's a voter or citizen knows that when a politician says, well, it was going to be 20, but it's only 15, be happy, that doesn't sell very well. But again, if you knew the minutia and the intricacies and the numbers that I know, what was accomplished was pretty remarkable. And they're able to now, with the purchase of this biomass plant, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, that was the only thing to do. You know, I don't know what John McCain did in his 7th year in Vietnam in the Hanoi Hilton, but I'm sure as hell bet he did some desperate things. That's where we were. And so we got to stop making policies and doing things that raise rates first. And I fear the constant up and forth, back and forth pendulum of political ideology running the utility should worry all of us.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So, depending on your position with regard to a separate governing board, not just an advisory board, do you feel that there would really be a significant amount of removal of politics from that board?
It would limit it. So I was a college student in Jacksonville University in 1984, and there was a guy named Jake Godbold and a guy named Tommy Hazuri, and there was Bridges, and there was tolls, and there was all this stuff, and there was consolidation of government. I don't know what all that meant, but I remember it sort of. I remember it was hard, and I remember they went through a lot of growing pains and all, and so I mean, this is not going to be. It's not simple. It's not going to be. It's not going to. Some of the challenges that are in the bill itself. Butcher is pointing out, I mean, there's also the authority is going to be able to make some decisions, and they're going to be able to develop this thing as we go. Ken Cornell talked earlier, or somebody talked about an aircraft carrier, right? Well, guess what? If the commanding officer of the aircraft carrier, they wish bad on him, wins the lottery and quits the Navy and leaves, the carrier's going to be fine. Anyone who's been in this situation in their life, the utility is going to be fine. The utility has professional management, it's good management. I happen to think it's better now than maybe it has been in the past, but it will eliminate, I think, people completely running on the utility, whether that be through fear-mongering about the utility, whether it be through, I want to do other things with the utility. I think the utility caused an impact to elections over the last 5 or 6 years at times, and so it's not going to eliminate. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. Politics isn't eliminating anything we all do anymore. And so, but the board over time, I think would come to function very well, and one thing we haven't even talked about is another thing of the utility, Brian, is that this utility has more than a third of its customers outside its service area, where we then are able to charge surcharges and other fees. I mean, the city commission gets millions of dollars in excess stormwater connections and more water connections, and then just has this crazy charity program that we do things in the city, and I just think that a lot of these policies over time would neutralize out, and we'd have a utility that runs well, that's a responsible steward of the environment and the planet, but at the end of the day, its core mission is to provide safe, reliable service at an affordable and competitive price. And I think it would happen, and I think there's been precedent for it to happen.
Susan, what do you think?
I just find it very difficult to accept the premise that political appointees are not subject to political influence. By definition, they are. The difference, again, getting specific to how this bill would structure things, because the referendum, like I read, it sounds pretty harmless, but there's nothing that can be done to change who the board is and how it's going to function and the powers that it's going to be given. And one of the things that I thought was the most chilling in this bill, as well as the previous 3 bills that were gone through the legislature and failed, is as the city attorney's memorandum pointed out, the level of insulation that they have in their decision making. And that is, they can make all sorts of bad decisions that everybody in this room would be horrified at, or at least, scratch their heads and say, how can they make these decisions? This is not good for the community, or maybe it's not good for the running of the utility. There's nothing anybody can do. You cannot vote them out of office. The city commission cannot remove them unless any one of them commits a felony in the process of executing their job as a utility board member. The only way that a board member can be removed is if, and it would be a 5-member board, if a majority of the other board members point, hey, this guy over here, we don't like him, we are going to vote him out. then they make a recommendation to the city commission, and then the city commission can kind of say, yes, we agree, and that person can be removed. But otherwise, if they're making bad decisions, we're stuck with it. So the voters can't remove them, the city commission can't remove them, the state legislature can't remove them, and it's not under the Public Service Commission, so they don't have a voice in this either. That to me is frightening. And you know, so we can talk about what kind of a governance system would be best for GRU and for our community, but I'm telling you, it's not this one. It is not this one because it is so rife with problems. You know, so when you know, all of you work for different companies, and you know whether you're on the board of director or you know maybe you are the CEO, that there's an accountability somewhere, and that's the problem. Is that the way this is structured, the authority would not be accountable to anybody. Oh, they get to also write their own code of ethics and business policy. So they're writing their own rules, and then they're only accountable to each other. That's not good business.
Speaking of
So Brian, that's an interpretation. That's not necessarily a fact.
No,
right?
it's
And we're
not.
not getting back and
Read the
forth
bill.
on it. I've read
Read-
the bill. I've been.
read the
yeah.
bill.
But I just
Yeah.
want to read.
Yeah.
Everybody else there can read the bill.
Yeah.
And also read the city attorney's memo. And
Yeah.
again, she brings. But there's things in there that provide. You know, it's going to evolve. The city commission is going to have some involvement. But again, to get into the minutia of specifically why, I think still loses sight of is it proper and just? Is it a good thing, a good idea to change the governance? And so I just want to make sure we still focus on that.
and I'll start with you, Susan, but given the present rate structure, how do you feel that you know, GRU's monopoly in our area, how does that affect, do you think, you know, economic development, the ability to attract or retain existing companies?
Well, I was here for the very beginning when they were showing, you know, how there's so much business going on that we don't have enough businesses to sell. I think that this is great. All you have to do is drive around Gainesville, and there are billions of dollars of growth and development going on. Gainesville proper, and then certainly going out into the urban fringe area. So I don't think there's a problem with business development. I think if anything, what concerns me is more one of the things that Todd alluded to, and that's really the low-income people. People like me, you know, I'm your basic middle-income person, and when my bill went up with the cold snap that we had, and yes, I had my heat on because I am a Florida girl and I hate the cold weather. So I knew I was going to have a really high bill, and we just kind of rolled with it. But there are people who live in rental housing, and their landlords are not keeping the buildings up. They'll raise the rent, but they're not using that money to provide insulation. They're not using that money to put in energy efficient appliances or air conditioners or low flow toilets or any of that kind of thing. And that's why the people who are worse impacted are people who live in older homes that have not been well insulated, do not have the, you know, the energy efficient appliances and good insulation in the ceiling, that kind of thing. What can we as a community do for that? GRU is trying to work with its customers, particularly its low-income customers. It's got its LEAP program going on right now, where if you need help in helping to weatherize your home, they will help you do that. If you need help in drawing out your bills over the course of time so that you're not hit with one big bill, they will do that. What I would like to see is I would like to see how can the private sector work with the landlords to find, and perhaps maybe through some kind of government grant program, how can we help these homes that are old, with that, you know, with old appliances, not energy efficient at all? What can we do as a community to address that so that people like what Todd referred to, that when they get hit with that $20 increase or more during a cold month, that it's not a shock to them?
Yeah, you know, I think clearly your utility rates and costs, are part of the overall effect of how growth happens and businesses grow and change, or in their own lives. You know, I mean, I was a mathematics major, right? So I'm just a guy. I'm a 51-year-old guy who's lived a life, got 3 kids in college, and you know what? When I've had more money at time in my life, I've spent it on stuff, and when I've had less money in my life, I've spent it less on stuff. I guess the reason I got addicted to the McFlurry is because I got addicted first to the dollar menu. 3 kids in high school. But my point is that of course it matters. And of course we have to be competitive. And of course there was a question earlier in the forum about incentives and whatnot. You know, I don't think we're going to get a BMW plant anywhere around here, but the states and the cities that do are aggressive. They have to compete. We're competing, you know, and it's all part of it. And so instead of having a one-off offer a company, or whether they're expanding or whether they're a new company coming in, it'd be nice just to have them not be able to see the bar graph of the utility rates on the commercial side and how that factors into their decisions. We've heard stories about companies. You know, at the end of the day, I don't know. As a politician, I didn't know if everyone that came saying we're leaving if not blank. I always had a little bit of a filter on that, you know, but I understood it. I don't know that there's any one. I mean, this concept of a death by 1,000 paper cuts, it's not just, is it the 1,000th or is it the first? You know, I don't know. But it absolutely it matters. And I think if we, again, and this is long term, I mean, there's not going to be a significant, you know, impact, I don't think. And again, we're talking about the electric side. You know, there's other things going on at utility that people should be aware of. I mean, you got a couple elected commissioners right now that are outright hostile to the private telecom community here locally. God forbid they do it, but they're going to try to compete in telecom. It's going to cost millions of dollars, and then they're going to have to go out and provide employees and salespeople and stuff to try to sell GrewCom services that you'd like to think they'd be competitive, but again, the way government works, someone pointed earlier, it doesn't. So, you know, I think that the utility is a big and important factor in people's personal lives and people's work lives. I do, and there's no way you can. And we are high. We are high on both, and I think long term we just need to start focusing on. And again, I worry that they will go back up. I worry that those of us out here that don't pay attention all the time will lose sight of the purchase of the biomass plant, the savings that are coming there, the millions of dollars that are coming there. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, they're going to go to something else. They will, if we don't watch it.
Okay.
And let me kind of jump in there. This is something that I think
You have
that
not
we
let me
need
bounce
to
back twice, but go for it.
that we need to put pressure on the commission, because what they need to do is they need to put it in on paper, put it into an ordinance that the
I tried to get Al
savings
Gore's
goes
lockbox.
direct.
I wanted Al Gore's lockbox.
Yeah.
And put it in there.
Okay,
and-
so right.
All right,
So this is what's important, is this is part of the public process, that we can go to the commission and we can, you know, say, you need to put into an ordinance that this money that is saved through the purchase of the biomass plant, that's going to go directly into rate abatement, or it's going to, maybe we can put it into the weatherization fund and help some of these rental properties who are not eligible for the LEAP program to, you know, work with these people, the low-income people who can't afford to buy energy-efficient appliances. That needs to be done. That's part of the public process. And we can do that through lobbying. You know, when you go talk to your elected officials, you're lobbying them, even though you're not a registered lobbyist. And we can put pressure on them, and if they don't do what we want them to do, we can vote them out of office. You can't do that with the board. That would result out of House Bill 759.
So speaking of public comment, we're going to take questions, and Dave is first.
Thank you. So I've got Ms. Butcher brought up JEA. I have a friend of mine who lives in a 5-bedroom, 4,000 square foot house in Jacksonville, and I wish my bill was as low as hers. I live in 1,200 feet, built in 1987, and her bill is literally a fraction of my bill. So whatever JEA is doing, I'm in. My question, this is pretty much a yes or no for both of you. Do you think it's possible that there's a conflict of interest between the people who set our utility rates also being the people who control the general transfer? Thank you.
I mean, I'll try to, yes, but there's the general fund transfer and the rates are all part of being managed by a municipal utility, having a municipal utility. One of the things I was going to read earlier was something from Moody's rating methodologies for public utilities and how they look favorable upon independent boards and different boards because of the way they govern and their expertise and whatnot. But it is absolutely, listen, and that's one of the things, that's one of the arguments you'll hear, is that a municipal utility should be used to do things in the community that a utility would not normally do because it doesn't make any financial or economic sense, generally. Those are my terms, but that's what we're saying. And there's examples of that here and there. we don't have time to argue that point, but I think it's worth a discussion. I understand people that want that. It kind of goes back to the free water to UF in 1905. So yeah, I think it's conflicted. We've lived it. Walked through some of the conflictions, but anyway. So yes to your question, but
Thank
I don't
you.
think it'll be removed completely here either.
Susan.
I'm not sure I would label it as a conflict of interest, but again, I'd like to go back and refer to the Chamber's 2013 Energy Study Report. They went through and they had quite an extensive panel of people who looked at GRU, looked at how they do business and what they do in, all of these different numbers. And when they came up with, these are the things that we think you need to do, took a few years to fulfill them, but the city and GRU finally got to do that. And the general fund transfer was one of them. They recognized that that's an important revenue source for the city. And they said it shouldn't be above this certain benchmark, and the city's kept it underneath that benchmark for a number of years now.
We had a question there.
Yeah.
There's one issue that we haven't approached yet, and that is representation. You said, oh, we can vote them out. Well, there's 30% and growing GRU users that don't have a say to be able to vote anybody out. So the unfair representation for those of us that don't have a say or can put in is really a hard pill to swallow, and that's a big thing. Now, if you come out and adjust that, and that's a big thing of the bill. I don't think it's going to necessarily bring rates down immediately or anything, but it's going to give me a voice to sit there and say what we want and what we don't want, which I do not have whatsoever now.
Actually, you do. When the Utility Advisory Board was created, it was written, the ordinance that created it was written in a way that said, yes, we are going to have county representation. And so actually, of the 7-member board, I think 4 of them are actually county residents. So in that regard, you do have representation, whereas this 5-member board, you might only have 1 person, and you can't vote them out, but you can vote out the people who appoint them. As far as, and I've heard people say, well, I'm a county resident, I'm a GRU customer, but I'm a county resident, I have no say over city elections. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. When you give money to candidates who are running for city commission, you're helping to get them elected.
Yeah,
You can't vote for them, but you can help elect them. There are other remedies. I know people don't really like that, but that's the reality of it. And that's why very often when you look at the financials of people who are running for city commission, it's very, very interesting to see where the financial or campaign donations come from. Another remedy is, and this one's a little more difficult, and I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but you can annex into the city. If you live along the urban fringe, you can do a voluntary annexation into the city. When you annex into the city, that 10% surcharge on electric and 20 or 25% surcharge on water and wastewater goes away, your bill automatically goes down.
Todd.
So.
I never liked that sales pitch. I don't know if any of you have ever had the horror of being in a position in life, whether at work or anywhere else, where you had responsibility but no authority. That's the UAB. They're responsible to spend hours and hours and hours to review and review and review, and then recommend things to the commission who can either do it or not. And so that's the county representation on there. I mean, it's better than nothing. There's a lot in life that's better than nothing. And what I will tell you is to try to just be fair, but it sounds political. These little things that have been taken year after year after year are little nuanced changes to try to get Keith Perry to stop his bill, and to try to get Chuck Clemens to not file his bill and all. Hey, we've done this. We've added this to we've done this board. Nothing has fundamentally changed, and that's what I think you need to understand. Nothing has fundamentally changed. So the county representation, not to bore you with my numbers and stuff too, but just if you go look at that APPA study and you look at the utilities our size, we're a 5-service utility, complicated, complex, $500 million or $1 billion, whatever, a lot of big deal, a lot of stuff going on. 36%, I think the number is, but 36% of the customers and the usage is outside of the city. It goes into that study they showed of those larger utilities where this model is more the norm, and that's part of the reason why. And it also, quite frankly, in my time as city commissioner, I couldn't ever figure out if I was a city commissioner. It didn't matter where the border was. You know, my kids went to school at Talbot, but they played sports at Diamond Sports Park. Hell, we played in Newberry. At some point, we did archery. We were everywhere, but the city commission approaches, many of the city commissioners approach it like when you cross that border, it's almost like you're going to enemy territory. And they treat the utility and the people in the county that way.
All right, we've got at least 2 more questions, so I'd ask you guys to try to keep it brief. And those asking questions, let's get to the question part. Who's up?
Okay, I'll try to make it real quick. So if this change does take place, do you think we could see fewer sewage spills, raw sewage spills into the creek? Thanks.
Sewage, Todd.
It's my expertise. Yes. I mean, I don't know, but you know, there's I'm not sure which ones you're talking about, but it's a short answer, and yes.
Well played.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of a maintenance and upkeep issue. And one of the good news about GRU is that they have built into, you know, the rate structure and how they do business, a contingency fund so that when these things happen, they just go and they can fix it, as opposed to if you're so busy cutting rates that you get rid of that contingency fund and you have a run to failure kind of business attitude, that when that sewage spill happens, it's going to take a while before the money's available to fix it. So, you know, I mean, it's an interesting question. I can't honestly say that the answer would be yes.
We have another question, or was that it? Yes, sir.
You were saying that people could give money in order to change an election and then have some influence. As long as we have spring elections where we have a 10 to 15% turnout determining the city commission, I don't think that really the community has really any say currently in its current format because 7/8 of the community is left out of that election almost every year because it is so not normal compared to the normal election cycle of every other election in the United States, which happens in November. So doesn't it make more sense if we move that more citizens then would be involved because that's the time of the year that they expect elections to happen, not a spring election where one $5,000 check or one angry neighborhood can swing an entire election and then therefore change the entire outcome of the local city government.
Yeah. Moving election. Susan.
You know, it's funny. This has come up a number of times. The very first time that this was posed to me, again, when we ran for office, it was during the spring. And believe me, going door to door is a lot more pleasant in the cooler weather than it is in August. And so at first I kind of thought very selfishly, oh my God, it's, you know, I can't imagine canvassing in the summer heat. And I also can't imagine as a candidate having to compete with everybody else that's going to be on an August or November ballot. And after thinking it through, I realized that that was as a candidate, and as a politician, that's a very, very selfish way to look at things because it's not about you as a candidate. It's not about you as the politician or the elected official. It's about the people. And so I agree with you. I do think that the elections should be moved. There is a movement afoot right now to do that. It's going to be on the November ballot with this referendum. It might be a good topic for another, if you could do one before then. But yeah, I think it's a good idea because the numbers have been crunched and it would at least double the voter turnout in city elections. And the thing that's even more brilliant is that it would save the city hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just imagine what that would be like if we could free up hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Todd.
So.
Goody. We can say like that. This issue, I joke, it's turned a lot of people into fiscal conservative. Anyway, they're going to do it in the fall. If you ever want to let me talk to you about why it's going to end up costing any regular person such as myself or not, whatever. I'm a Republican. Anyone to get elected
okay, you
again,
can say it out
I'll
loud.
tell you about it. You know, so it makes sense on the surface, but having gone through 2 elections myself, it's the only way you can get city issues to be focused on. So now the elections, and they'll be moved because it's an easy vote. It'll now be on the 4th, 5th, 6th page of amendments and ballots, and however many D's and R's there are voting, that's going to give you some numbers. In the election before the presidential primary, 200 or 300 students voted for your city commissioners and all. 5,000 or 6,000 voted a couple of years ago, ushered a new mayor in and stuff. And I mean, it maybe would have happened anyway, but the turnout, I'm sure they were all focused on the city issues, right?
Okay, so in the interest of time, we're going to ask each of you to wrap it up in around a minute. That's 60 seconds for the math major. Since you went second, I'll let you wrap up first.
All right. Now, I just want you to just inform yourselves. This thing is going to be interesting to watch. There's probably going to be funded money for it, funded money against it. There's going to be all kinds of hysteria. It's going to be a ton of misinformation. This is a natural and normal evolving thing to do in a utility of our size. I have a personal vested interest in it because I sat in meetings. I listened to a commissioner I served with say he didn't care how high utility rates were because the only people that ever complains are people that waste power. I heard another commissioner say she's tired of hearing people complain about their light bills. If you're cold in the winter, put more sweaters on. Now, I don't know if that attitude will ever return to the city commission, but it might. I lived it. It is not going to eliminate politics from our utility, but it will vastly, vastly lower it over time. And as somebody who watched someone they love later in their life, to know the political football that this utility is in this community and what it costs people's lives, I would just much rather have it in the hands of a body that can manage for the long term and the long haul in a better way, and let's get on with our lives and let our commissioners worry about important things and stuff, and spending other time on other issues. Thank you.
Susan.
Okay, thank you. So if you remember anything about this particular referendum, it should be this. It's going to create a whole new layer of bureaucracy. It's going to bloat city government with unpredictable fiscal impacts, scant checks and balances, and virtually no oversight on fiscal matters. If you're a small government fiscal conservative, this should concern you. We already know that there's no clear indication that this is going to cause anybody's utility bills to go down. It contains uncertainties, unpredictable impacts. Some aspects might be actually unlawful or unconstitutional. We have a governance system in place. One of the brilliant things about it is that it was created by ordinance. The UAB was created by ordinance. So if we want to give them, I shouldn't say we, I'm not with the city anymore. If the city commission wishes to give them more power, they can do it easily by ordinance. And I believe that there are talks going on right now on that very topic. How can they empower the UAB with more responsibility and more duties? Anyway, so I greatly appreciate this opportunity to talk about this because this is an extremely important topic. I think that this should be just the first of many public discussions. I hope other people will get involved. I don't think Todd and I should be the only ones up here talking all the time. But it is important for everybody to have a clear understanding about what this bill is and what it isn't, what it's going to do and what it's not going to do. The bill itself and the city attorney's memorandum are public record. You can look them up by going to the city's website. I encourage you to do that. If you're really that interested, you really want to see what this is, read the documents yourselves, because it's really not that hard. But anyway, so thank you so much for taking the lead on this and having us both here to talk about this important topic. And I wish everybody a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you both. And thank you for enduring all those years of meetings on the city commission. So I will shut up and leave it to Bo.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. One thing I totally forgot to do earlier while I have you here, if you are in real estate, if you own a business, if you buy real estate, if you sell real estate, if you work with customers who buy real estate, is John Van Duzer still here? John, are you still here? Did he already leave? John, back there. John is a very, very intelligent guy in town with James Moore and Company. We are doing a webinar together that's free February 22nd at 2 p.m. Is that right, John? 2 p.m.? It's for an hour. It's all about real estate investors, brokers, how we're going to get taxed, how it affects us, the investors that we work with. If you buy real estate with other people's money, if you buy real estate yourself, if you have a fund, whatever it is, you're going to want to be on this. Please visit that. It's free. I will send out that email after this event. Thank you for everybody being here.